Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi-Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Coming off the heels of the Oscar season, we decided to review a film that I had heard, and I think we had all heard, was really good. We know
of it.
And we hadn't seen yet. And it turns out that it got snubbed like a motherfucker.
Big time.
This is The Farewell, and I am going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
So we generally reserve some space in our schedule for Oscar movies that we need to catch up with.
Yep.
We were 100% accurate with all of our hits this year. So
bang on.
Knocked
So now
it out of the park.
we fit this one in, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
And Scott Thurlow's with us as well.
And I, of course, want to go to attend a fake wedding myself.
And Scott, as far as I recall, I believe you've got a funny logline for us.
Yeah, so this is Don't Tell Grandma That She's Dead or Dying or Very Seriously Ill.
I like it. Keep
it under wraps.
So, yeah, with that in mind, let's. I'm going to start with the plot. It's a fairly simple plot. Basically, a Billy, played by Awkwafina, is living in the United States with her immediate family. The movie starts off, she's talking to her grandmother in fairly short order. She finds out through her father that her grandmother is dying, and none of the family wants to tell her that she's dying. So they all contrive a wedding with one of Billy's cousins to go and see
as a reason
her one last time. She's kind of the matriarch of the family. They go and have
they had the fake wedding.
Very, very bittersweet times. A lot of very close familial things that really reminded me of my own family in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And then they have the wedding, which is a lot of fun, but also really bittersweet as well. And then there's just some kind of sad scenes at the end, and then it's kind of over. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the movie. It is and despite the fact that it's a simple plot, I think it's a it delves
very deeply into a lot of familiar and cultural stuff. I think
it does a really great job of telling this story, this simple story, in a emotionally really complex way. And I think it really does an amazing job of bringing you into almost making you, the viewer, feel like part of this family.
Yes, exactly. God damn you! But I'm glad you said that.
Through many different facets, not just through the telling of and the script and the plot, but also the characters. And this is a movie that really intertwines a lot of its aspects together really well. But in terms of just the plot, it does a fantastic job telling the story. Part A, Part B, Part C. It's beginning, middle, and end.
It's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of convoluted stuff. But go on.
Yeah. And it's just a really tight script. So I'm going to leave it to you guys. I think, I'm probably going to give it a 3, but we'll see what you say, and
Cody,
we'll go from there.
Now, tonally, this is a wonderful mixture of a good kind of dark comedy, or at least dark comedy has it makes light of death in a lot of ways, and also cultural differences between America and China, and all of these things. But it's a very serious subject that's treated there's a lot of background gags,
and that's levity to it.
But that's what really attaches you with the family, as you said, is because you're laughing along with them, and their very human characteristics of the situation. And it makes the ending incredibly emotional. I wasn't crying You were crying.
Oh, I was fucking crying. I'll admit it.
And I teared up a bit at the end, and it's a very emotional impact, especially when the grandmother stands at the end, watching the car go off, and it's joyful, it's heartbreaking, it's very, very human, and it's a wonderful story, and it's a very intelligent story as well, because it deals with a lot of, when we get into themes, we'll talk about it, but this is just, it's more than a comedy drama, a dramedy, if you will.
Mhm.
It's but it's not just a vehicle for themes. It mixes all of these in well, as you said. So I have no reason not to give this a 3.
Yeah, it's all interwoven. So I was looking at a very strong 2, but I think by the time the final scene rolled, I was like, I'm gonna give it a 3. I think it does, like you said, we'll get into it in themes and maybe a couple other questions coming up. But in terms of plot, you can follow along with it. And you just get sucked into this family's life, and like I hate to say, not skiing, like it's a cultural thing where they don't want to let a beloved family member know that she's very deathly ill, so they're trying to give her a good time, or at least like present themselves and have a farcical thing happening. But
when you know you have cancer, it's what kills you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they have the saying, like, when you get cancer, you die, meaning don't tell them that they have cancer and they'll never die. You know, like,
I mean, and that's,
this kind of
that
idea.
ties in thematically and other, like I said, other questions. But just on the surface, yeah, I think I was pretty much along for the ride the whole time. Now, I was going to say I thought it started a little slow, but I don't think that's quite true now, like retroactively talking about it. I think it's damn solid. Like you said, Sivo, very tightly, very awesomely scripted. Very clever as well, like with the gags and stuff, what we'll get to maybe in style. But yeah, in terms of plot, I think I have to give it a 3. And it's one of the best films that I've seen in the season. And yeah, fuck the Oscars for not even like having this on anything.
I mean, it must have gotten, I don't even remember right now, but it must have gotten a Best Foreign, right?
No,
Yeah.
I looked it up.
Golden Globes it did.
That's insane.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
That's absolutely insane. I guess maybe because it's A24, they count it as an American movie or something. I don't know.
Whatever bullshit reason they chose not to acknowledge it,
it won Best Foreign in like the BAFTAs. Like everyone is saying this is one of the better foreign language
Best
films.
Best Foreign should be like a slugfest this year between this and Parasite. Like that should be,
but it's not going to be. It's unfortunately,
absolutely bonkers that this wasn't both.
Sure.
Best Foreign and Best Picture.
More to say on our Oscar ep when we come at that, but all I'm saying is I also agree with a very damn solid to strong 3 for plot. It was fantastic from start to finish.
We've discussed in the philosophy section the idea of narrative closures versus emotional closures. And this had a fairly simplistic but narrative structure with closure to it. Especially when you find out this is based on a true story at the end. When I think it starts off based on actual lives, which is great.
Yeah.
But this has one of the best emotional arcs.
Payoffs,
and it earns all of its emotion at the end.
Absolutely.
100% agree. Can't say pretty much anything else.
All right. Yeah, so that's 3s all around for this, sounds like. And
Yes,
Ian, why don't you keep going with themes?
There is a lot to unpack here. Because you have, on one hand, an Americanized writer-director who comes from China. I don't know her whole history, but she went to Boston College, I know that. And it seems like, and this is based on a true story, so she came over, and it's her discussion of, in a lot of ways, America versus China, not in a hostile way, just pointing out cultural differences here.
Yeah, like
especially when they deal with how they deal with death. And really, there's some good arguments that are made for the idea of family and versus the way that America handles its elderly population and death, and the fact that we ship old people off to homes where in China it's more keep them in the dark. It's individualism versus groupthink. The idea that telling them there's a great discussion there with telling someone, "Oh, you have cancer, Steve-O, or you're in the hospital," relieves that person of the burden of having to deal with it. That they shift all the weight onto the person who's diagnosed, and that was such a fascinating point they made. But there's a whole discussion of that. But there's also a whole discussion of like there's the diaspora. Is that the diaspora of China becoming a wealthy nation, and it now coming to what happened to America when America was at its heights. Families breaking apart as they shift around because there's now money to send your children to America for school and the destruction of that kind of what the previous generation had of close-knit communities.
Yeah.
Now that China's becoming a bigger thing, how that's breaking apart. There's a lot going on in this film, and they handle it really well because I would say there's thematic vignettes that occur throughout this entire
that's
thing.
really well said.
And it never overburdens you with too much. It discusses a topic at a time as it goes through. And there are like scenes dedicated to a specific theme that they want to talk about, but it all braids together very well in a Barthian sense.
Yes.
One of the topics it wants to handle. So I have to give this a very, very strong one.
Yeah, I agree. It's effortlessly done throughout. It's sort of like, I want to say like switch back and forth, but the vignette thing I think is a better way to put it. Where like a certain scene happens and they have a discussion about some aspect of either the culture, the family life, and like sort of their duty to not reveal this information to a beloved family member, and that way they all collectively shoulder the burden and the guilt of it, and not put it all on one person and sort of wipe themselves away. And yeah, I mean that's just one single aspect, right? Then you have like the family unit as a whole, and like arguments of Awkwafina's character Billy, like she's like quote unquote the most Americanized, so she feels like the most compelled to reveal this. But as she starts interacting and having conversations with her other family members, sort of change her mind, or like is coming around to the idea that this is how it's done, and perhaps it is best this way, right? And again, those two things are just two of the broader things that they discuss, broader themes and thematic elements that are just nicely sort of shuffled into the story of this family, and they're trying to say goodbye to their grandmother without saying goodbye, in quotes. Yeah. So yeah, I agree, E. Very strong one. There's a lot to unpack here. We can probably discuss themes way more in general, but
it's not preachy ever. It's not coming down on the side. Well, it does kind of come down the side of the Chinese method of handling,
but it's not hard-nosed in your face or anything.
It's really dealing with individualism versus the collective type thing, and I think that it handles the debate very well.
Yes, I agree with all that.
I think that's interesting, and I think that depending on like your own personal take on the movie, you can say, "Oh, I think this comes down to the side of like the Chinese way is the right way to do it," or like. Obviously, Billy was never okay with that, even when she had to be at some point, and like maybe in her mind, in our main characters, in our protagonist's mind, the American way would be more correct. She's almost till the very end, she's like talking about how it would be illegal in America,
right,
yep, things like
exactly.
that. I think that it's really fascinating, but there's so much, like you said, there's so much about this movie that like it's a movie that constantly pits two sides against one another and like has an argument without having it become, without saying who it
this is definitively correct.
This is the
way.
winner.
Yeah.
There's the scene with Billy's mother and her aunt talking about America versus China, but she keeps like her mom keeps going, but you're sending your son to China to America, right? To go get his degree or whatever. And she's like, yeah, but you have money, so you're sending your kid to America, right? So, like, why are you,
Sure, there's discussions all that.
And she keeps saying, but he's going to be coming back to China, he's going to bring that back to China and all that stuff.
But that might not be the case in the long run.
But maybe not. We could we go back to that whole thing. There's the conversation between her father and her uncle a couple times, actually. There's the one where her uncle is explaining why they do this to Billy, where the two of them are smoking cigarettes, or her father and her uncle are smoking cigarettes. And then there's the other scene in the hospital where they're talking about why her father going, this would be illegal in America, and he's like, well, we're not in America, basically. Like, this is how it's done here.
I mean, the doctors are conspiring to
hide this from the woman. It's a cultural thing that they do, so he knows, he's like sort of in on it as well.
It's interesting, and the fact that the doctor speaks English because he studied in Britain brings another little, just like a little fold into the wrinkle. Things that like exactly. Are like, wow, so how come this guy isn't more westernized, something like that, interesting stuff like that.
And it just is underfunded.
I love the scene where her mother is like railing against how emotional the Chinese are at funerals and things like that. Like
so dramatic.
they hire people to come and like cry and stuff
criers.
like that.
Yeah.
And she's like, I just can't show emotion. And then at the end of the movie, when she's crying, that makes it even more like
hits home even more. Yeah,
it's even more impactful. There's so much. We could talk about themes of this movie for hours. I think.
Like I said.
What I love about this too is that there's a phrase I like to say that you can't go home again.
Mhm.
But this is, I feel, and I don't mean to speak for the director here, I don't know her intent, but it feels like her re-exploring her roots in a lot of way.
Right.
And that adds to a level of allowing an outside look into China from someone who's both an insider and an outsider.
Who sort of lives in both worlds.
And
Exactly.
It's very accessible look at what might in less deft hands make it seem like it pokes fun, but also is reverent of,
exactly. Shadows
these
both those lines.
traditions. It's a lovely look at that world.
I think it lets fun be had where it's actually at. Like, you see the joy that comes from this type of familial structure, and like, you know, it's a pretty sad movie when you think about it, but like,
it's also a joyful movie.
I mean,
but also, it's
It celebrates
celebrating
the highs and
family,
lows of life.
It's celebrating
Exactly.
family that and the life of this. Like, it's this full celebration of the life of her grandmother. While she's still there, and that's, I don't know. There's a lot.
It
There's
covers
a ton.
a lot of ground, and it does it so well in all fronts.
But anyway, I think we're gonna give it all ones on themes. And Scott, why don't you talk to us about antagonists?
All right, so cancer. I mean, like, of course, that's my joking answer, but I mean, that's the central problem they're facing. An elderly member of their family is diagnosed, and within their culture at large, the etiquette is not to let them know and sort of live as if it were normal, right? Like, live your life around them without letting on that that they are indeed faced with this, critical illness.
Right.
So, there's nothing that is like, no character is the antagonist in this film. Like, I'll say that outright, right? It's going to be a broad concept. It's like something like that, right? And maybe it goes into dialogue. Like, I've been itching to talk about it, and I'll get to it when we get to it. But at the same time, I can't not address the fact that it's sort of like familiar duty in a sense. Like, that's sort of one of the, speaking of themes, one of the things that many of the family members try to impress upon Billy and others, like, that are in that spot where, like, this is how we do it. So I know it sucks, and it's much different. It's almost diametrically opposed to the culture that you're used to in your country. But this is again, these are traditions. This is how we handle this situation, and you're part of it. So we're all going to have to share, split up the responsibility and do this. So I think it's just like being faced with a very awkward and harsh situation that, in order to make the time that your relative has left better, you have to sort of show a brave face for. So it's like just dealing with that, like, and I know, again, it's fascinating because it's so culturally different than what we have here in our country that you don't even think about it. Like, we'll never do that. Like, that's, it seems almost,
we just warehouse ourselves.
yeah, exactly. It seems almost, alien, if I can use that word. But so I think that is the antagonist, where it's faced, the whole family at large faced with this issue, struggling and trying to balance their lives and the betterment of their Nana's life as well, or again, the time she has left that they assume, and just trying to get through it without being purely morose the whole time, or something like that, right? Like, they have to pretend that they're having a whole fake wedding, and of course, like, weddings are the opposite of when of being diagnosed with a very serious illness. So good.
I might disagree on that.
All right.
But,
well, all I'm saying is, I think that is the antagonist, just like that. Oh, you right there?
No, I'm fine.
That being faced with that situation and having to sort of shoulder that responsibility for your loved one and for the rest of your family as well. So I think, like, that's like the broad nebulous antagonist as I see it. So I will give that a 1, because I think certainly you could see it. You could see the struggle on all members of the family throughout in various ways, even if it was humorous and moments of levity of it around it at the time, sometimes as well. Yeah.
Before I met my wife, I was incomplete. Now I'm finished.
Hey, all right. I think that fucking Norm Macdonald. I think that you've got a lot right there, Scott. I'm almost in like the opinion that the real antagonist is the struggle of trying to
Maintain a sort of beneficial lie in a sense, or something like that. A white lie, I guess.
no, like the struggle of trying to make the two, like for Billy, the protagonist, like trying to make her two lives basically kind of coexist at a time when they're diametrically opposed to each other.
East versus West.
And like it's not that one is the antagonist or the other is the antagonist. The real antagonist to her is like the
Straddling
tumultuous,
the line.
like the storm between them, you know?
Yeah, I like that.
And that's what really causes her the most trouble. I was thinking about this question because it was, spoiler, probably the only one that I was thinking about possibly giving a 0 to.
Really? Okay.
Just because, I mean, yeah, I know that she faces a lot of anxiety around this issue, and she does feel like antagonized, kind of, but it's nothing concrete.
Right, exactly.
And I think the biggest thing, and I think this is actually a really good antagonist, and becomes a pretty strong one when I think about it this way, is like, I think that struggle within her is used to amazing effect to show kind of her, you can, like, we can see the American side of her, right? Like, we see all the stuff that is American in her
that we identify with. Sure.
There are, like, you can try to understand the Chinese in her, but you're never going to have the struggle. Like, we're never going to have the struggle that she has, like being both parts of those and like being raised both parts of those, you know?
Sure.
So I think that's an amazing, I think that is an amazing turn as an antagonist, I guess, in this.
But what's also beautiful, and this might be skipping around a little bit, but I think it's pertinent to what you just said there, is that, yeah, we might not have an idea of what it's like to grow up in China, but we all know what it's like to have a grandparent who we care for and who has expectations for us, and we're not living up to those expectations and all of that. Like, it's it was one of those human things. Like, my
very, very relatable.
My grandmother passed away a couple of years ago, and like, I know exactly everything she was feeling in this, and it spoke to the very human condition. But I think that it's not just the East versus West in the sense of the death, but her entire identity struggling
is
with
at war with itself. Yeah, for sure. You're right.
Her wanting to, she didn't get the fellowship. She wants to go back to China from America, although she's being pulled between those two worlds. And it's, I think, something everyone can identify with, even if they don't have the specifics of that struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all of those things all rolled into one, which I'm giving a very strong one.
I just want to hop back to themes for a second, because I forgot to mention this. There's a great discussion over benevolent lies.
Yeah.
And
that's why I
how much can you
well.
hide, or how much should you hide to preserve the well-being of others in your life?
Until the malevolence is worse than the until the bad is
so
worse
the balance
than
the,
But
then they're good.
Like, the first quarter of this film, or the first scene, is instead both of them lying to people. Just
true.
I'm not wearing earrings. Like, I'm wearing my hat. Yeah, that whole thing.
Yep. You're right.
I was just talking to a friend. Like, that was great.
I'm at your aunt's grandmother. House. Yeah, I'm at your aunt's house. There's like a loudspeaker, hospital loudspeaker, obviously in the background.
Yeah. So all that stuff, I think, combines to make an antagonistic force/element and very effective within the story.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that's ones all around for antagonist.
Yep.
Protagonist with me. I want to say that the protagonist is Billy, but also Nai, I think.
Yes, I would agree with that.
I think they're both. I think they share protagonist duties. I love both of their portrayals of these characters. I think that both actors do a phenomenal
performances
job.
were fucking off the charts. Yes,
and I just found one of you just told me that Shujin Zhao, I believe, is the woman who plays Nai is like a huge actress in China. And damn, she doesn't do a great job in this movie. Aquafina started off as a rapper, did a turn as like the outrageous friend in Crazy Rich Asians, and now does this like super emotional, dour like character. I was really impressed with her.
But she's also dry. It has a nice dry humor to her character as well. Like, she runs the spectrum.
I mentioned that time when I was watching with Scott. She reminds me of Daria at times.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. She does a phenomenal job. Just like, and I love all the little jokes about how her Chinese isn't very good when she goes and gives the speech at the wedding. It was like pretty great. There's the scene where she like really finally like emotionally breaks down sitting on the floor looking for the earring right before the wedding. There's just so many great moments for her, and then for Nine, like her almost unmitigated joy throughout this whole process, and like loving that her family's around, but obviously having to give them shit. Like I was saying,
to her nothing untoward is happening. Of course, she thinks it's just a wedding.
Yeah, she's got to be like the matriarch who is like, she reminds me so much of my grandmother, like down to like my grandmother used to like call me and my brother stupid in like an endearing way, like, oh, you're so stupid, like that exact same thing. I was like, my fucking heart, my grandmother died a few years ago, so like this was like seeing her up on the big screen and Chinese, but yeah, like those two characters were so fucking incredible.
I agree.
I can't say enough about them.
So after I watched the movie, I forget what the review's from, but they pointed out something very interesting. That the grandmother had a very difficult job, or the actress had to portray both a loving, intelligent, driven woman, but also that you believe she could be bamboozled.
Right.
In the sense that
the rest of her family
lied to her about her illness and she didn't figure it out. And the fact is that when it's pointed out to me, I'm like, yeah, that's really common. But I never at once was like questioned any of that angle. And she just pulled off. Like, I never questioned once, why didn't she figure this out?
I love that, like, they didn't really explicitly say this at any point, but like I thought a lot of it was like, oh, the family's just keeping her busy so that she doesn't figure it out. Like, oh, plan this wedding. Like, oh, you have to take care of all, you make food for everybody here, and like all this. Like, end, there's no time for you to like try and figure out this shit.
That's true. All that. I mean, but also, and like at the end, they literally doctored the test results because she was getting them. So like they even went that far extra mile to like keep the ruse going.
But I just think that the performances were amazing all around.
Yeah, I mean, to speak to that, I don't have much more. I think you cover a lot of ground. Yes, I think it's mostly Billy and like maybe 60-40 her and Nanai, and I think both of them were excellent characters, amazingly portrayed. And I was almost going to maybe make the argument for the entire family, but I don't think it's quite true. I think it focuses more on Billy. Like it's told through her eyes for the most part, and then through Nana's eyes as well.
And their chemistry is fantastic.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Thank you.
You believe
Thank you. I was coming to that, but
that they are like grandmother and granddaughter.
Yes.
Like right away, just on that phone call, right away, I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
this is
like completely natural.
This is the perfect phone call to be having with your grandmother." Like, yeah, I'm wearing my hat, Grandma. Yeah,
I got a coat, Grandma. Yeah. Sure, but
it's cold. Yeah, I'm watching out for murderers in New York, but they're gonna come kill me.
I do agree that I think they both deserve a shitload of credit, and again, it's a fucking travesty that they are not recognized in the official awards in quotes, but regardless, they both did an amazing job.
Long live A24. Fuck the Academy.
Was the AFI gave this picture?
It was in the best films of the year in the AFI list.
I think that if the AFI ever gets off their ass and makes a new list, this will probably be on.
Well,
is it an American film? It's not.
It can be. It's A24, so I think it can be like considered an American film.
Well, whatever the
which is probably why it's not foreign. Although I think it's foreign language film now for the Oscars, so it should have been fucking nominated. Anyway,
either way, we're rewriting the AFI for them as well, so stay tuned for that. But regardless, Protagonist, huge one.
I wanted to mention one more thing before we're done with Protagonist, and it's a thing about Nine and a similar thing about my grandmother is like anytime that family was around, there was always a table full of food. And I love that. I love that. Like all the eating scenes in this were like so reminiscent of like getting together with my family. Like everybody's fucking talking over each other and shit. Like everybody's passing food. Like pass the potatoes, pass the whatever. Like digging forks into the fucking things.
I'm gonna attempt to make those meat pies that you had.
Also,
do it, man. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Ones all around.
Literally
strong
shove
ones.
that in your face. Like,
Take a
Yeah,
take a
here,
big bite,
eat this.
Steve-O.
You used to love this.
Take a big bite.
All right, cool. So one's all around for protagonist,
Mhm.
and moving on to supporting with Ian.
they did a phenomenal job with this family. Every single character had a personality to them.
They were
all
distinct.
memorable.
Yes,
They're distinct.
Exactly.
Mhm.
They had a role to play. It felt like a family. Whether you're dealing with the parents, whether you're dealing with the aunt and uncle, whether you're dealing with the cousin who's one of the best characters. His
by far
facial
my
expressions
favorite.
are amazing throughout this. Or his
Demeanor.
bride to be, even though they're
Yeah.
not getting married, they've known each other for 3 months, and he's like, "Hey, baby, I need you to
Hey, please help.
pretend you're having a wedding."
My
with me."
family's having a caper, and I need you to be my bride.
What's it with Asians having capers?
They love capers, man.
Uh,
What do you want?
Even like the doctors and all of that.
Mhm.
You had the grandmother's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, little
All
man.
of these built this world. They all had great comedic timing.
Yeah.
All had their moments. Yeah, I know it all worked really, really well for me.
Yeah, I mean,
So overall, I'm giving it a very strong.
I of course am agreeing. I think how I believe was the cousin, like the fake
Mhm.
groom,
Yeah.
and yeah, like every time it was on screen. Even sometimes I was like, maybe this is style, but sometimes he was in the background while shit was happening in the foreground, and like he was just being ridiculous, but like he's just.
He gets fucking hammered.
He's almost
at
like
his wedding.
he's almost like a fish out of water, where he's just like he has this look in his face, like haplessly lost, but
Yeah.
he's trying to play along the very best that he can. Meanwhile, his family's like, all right, do this, do that, the other thing. But yeah, you're right. Like I think
You're getting married, but you're not getting
They're
married.
like his
was-
parents are like his Chinese is really good, and then he talks like one word every 3 seconds.
Well, no, you're right, E. I'm just going to back it up that this family was completely believable. They acted and their chemistry was so spot on that I was sold completely on them. This is who they are. This is what they've always done. They have their quirks. They know like each other very well, and they're all coming together to try to make what they think is going to be the last months or so of their matriarch's
Yeah.
life like the best as possible. And the best, like the plan they come up with is to have a fake wedding so everybody can have a good time, or at least it's framed as a positive atmosphere. And yeah, so I think Billy's father. I'm sorry, I don't have the actors, any of these actors' names.
Zima, I believe
Yes.
is his name. He's been in a ton of
He's
shit.
been in a shitload of stuff, but he was spot on. His the lady who played his wife / Billy's mother, and then her aunt, and I think actually, and her father's older uncle.
Mm.
I think again he had definitely some highlight things. Yeah, like you said, each of them got like a little slice of the spotlight, and they were always fleshed out throughout. And yes, Steve-O, the gathering scenes where they're all like eating food everywhere and they're just like bullshitting with each other. It was so spot on. It was so perfectly organically believable that they all deserve, again, a huge amount of credit, and I'm giving it a big
They're
one.
quirky without being unrealistic.
Yes,
Right.
spot
And
on.
that worked really well.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so I think we mentioned most of the people, but Hyan, I believe, is her father.
Yes.
Her grandmother's sister, I guess, went by Little Nai Nai.
Yep. He was really
Was,
good too.
I believe, if I have this correct, played by
Lulu Wang's
Lulu
actual.
Wang's actual grandmother's sister.
Right.
Which is really fascinating. And they did this whole movie. This is like, I might as well say it now because I don't know when else I'm going to say it, but like, this is a hilarious story. They did this whole fucking thing. She's still alive as of when this
In
movie was
real life,
released. Her grandmother's still alive. They did this whole movie in like the town that her grandmother lives in without letting her
Still
know
without telling her,
that
yeah.
she had cancer. She didn't know that she had cancer until after the movie was released, and she was reading reviews of it and found out what it was about.
Yeah.
Like,
Sometimes truth is stranger than
that's fucking
fiction.
hilarious. But
Unfortunately, she's going to be dead soon. now.
and her own sister is in the movie about lying to her about having cancer.
Yeah.
without telling her.
It's very meta, and it's
Fucking hilarious.
it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, it's like Mrs. Gao, I believe, is one of the characters. She's like one of the.
She's like a housekeeper
who
for them or
goes to
something.
like get the papers at the end of the movie and
test
can't
results.
read. Oh yeah, the test results at the end and can't read. So like, there's that whole scene between her and Billy. Mr. Lee, I don't think we mentioned,
Yeah, I was waiting
who's
for one of you
the
to
like
mention him.
doddering old I don't even think they're married.
No,
like just the
she's like
the boyfriend
a
of her
housemate
mom.
for the grandmother,
Of
so
her
she doesn't have to live
grandmother, that is.
alone. And
Yeah.
he just does his own thing here and there.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
You guys already mentioned the uncle. So about how and his like whole thing. I love him getting hammered at his wedding.
Yeah, that was a great
and then
montage.
completely breaking down and crying.
Mm.
And then they're trying to take the wedding pictures after that.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
He has his,
He
he has the saddest face ever. And yeah, it's so good. It's so
he's
good.
so
You just gotta
sad.
see it.
The great
There are tears of joy.
Nine is like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And he's just like completely done. Really good.
It's
really
fantastic
funny.
stuff.
Anyway, so that's all to say. The supporting
Amazing
characters in this
supporting
are
cast.
incredible.
A huge cast and a
Strong
great
one.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's gonna be ones all around, and it's gonna take us to dialogue with Scott.
Alrighty, so I'm waiting to jump into this. One of the things I love the most is that because of the framework, because of the setup, so much of the dialogue is dripping with irony for the audience. It is so fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Right? So like, a lot of it has a double meaning, of course, like, because they're trying to keep this ruse going. So like, there's all these moments peppered in where, as an audience, you know what's really happening, but you know the characters, at least one of them doesn't know.
Right.
So it's just brilliant. It's spot on. It's some most clever scripts I've seen in a while. And on top of that, not only that, there's some great gags, right? There's some visual gags, but there's also like some great back and forth, like with specifically I think with Billy and her mom a lot. Like she was like sort of like elbowing her like here and there. But then we come to you had mentioned earlier some very serious philosophical not monologues per se, but moments like maybe 4 or 5. The scene with her father and her uncle and Billy outside the hotel smoking cigarettes. Explain that. There's a great scene when they go to visit their grandfather who has already passed in the funeral or at the cemetery, and that was
right
fucking
after.
great.
So that's right after her mom is like decrying the use of like professional criers at like funerals and shit.
It cuts immediately to a
like,
fake cry.
Wow, like somebody like bawling.
Yes.
So fucking good.
So it's all spot on, and like because you get that sort of double, sometimes triple layer to it, it's just so good, and it just keeps you going along. Again, it has moments of levity, moments of serious like discussion back and forth. Like here's how the etiquette is done. Here's why we should do this. Here's why it's better for your nanai to be left in the dark, right? And then Billy struggling with herself, and also sometimes with her mother, father / aunt being like, I really think we should tell her, and they're always like, no, here's why we shouldn't. Goes back and forth, and yeah, it has again moments of perfect drama, of emotional impact, and also of levity and humor. So all of it was a great sort of roller coaster ride of that, and because again the irony of you knowing the whole situation and not every character in the story not knowing, it works. It's so great, and it's just spot on. I can't really say more. I'm giving it a super strong 1, but that is the aspect to me possibly that stood out the most at early on, and as the movie went forward, it only got better.
Absolutely, and I think that you're absolutely right about that, and I think that the moments where that kind of facade or like that like double meaning for everything is dropped makes those even more special as well. Like when she's talking to the doctor who speaks English, and she's just like, you know what, fuck it. Like, just tell me what the deal is. She can tell me she can't understand
She's
you.
like, is my grandma
like,
good? No, exactly.
And like, it's just a dropping of all pretenses at that point. Or like when he tried, like, everybody tries to ask her about America, and she's like just worried about her grandmother. When he starts doing that, she's like, yeah, it's great, but also, can you tell me what the fucking diagnosis is?
Exactly.
There's some moments that are awesome in terms of that too, like that are just like completely without. She can let her guard down into some of those scenes, and like she doesn't have to pretend or make sure that everything that she's saying is coming out the right way, so she doesn't give something away.
She can be sort of more rawly honest at like certain points.
But it is wild seeing a script written so that every line of, or almost every line of dialogue has to be written in such a way that you're not saying. You're not like speaking for your character. You're speaking for your character who's speaking like deceptively, right? Like,
exactly.
So you have to be very aware of the language that all your characters use. And I think that this script is brilliant in terms of
I
that.
agree.
So good. So that's what I'll say.
Well, to build off of that slightly, you have a Japanese speaker who doesn't speak Chinese or English.
Mhm.
You have English speakers of varying strengths. You have Chinese speakers of varying strengths,
and some crossover in between.
And then
people
Chinese
who
speakers who don't speak English.
Yeah, it is the balancing act of
Yeah, man.
being able to have scenes with like 6 to 12 people in it and keeping track of what people know and what they don't know and all of those characters and what is said. They have this point, the Japanese wife, or fake wife,
Who's super
oblivious
clueless
the entire time.
Not by any fault of her own, she just can't speak Chinese.
She just sort of broke along to the
Yeah.
situation. Exactly. Go ahead.
At every moment, we as the audience know more than any of the other characters do. And this is predicated a lot on lying.
Mhm.
A lot of the humor comes from, I know that what they're saying is incorrect. And it's handled really well. And one of my favorite gags is him leaving the cigarette at the graveyard.
Yeah.
And the joke about everyone lying
Amazing.
about smoking.
Yeah, he
throughout
quit.
this,
He quit.
running
No,
gag.
he didn't. He told you he quit, but he never quit.
Yeah. Let him have a cigarette.
Anyway, let him. He's dead. What's he gonna do?
What more harm could happen?
Yeah. Yeah, it was all brilliant throughout. Like I said, when it needed to be serious and it needed to be more like lighthearted, it all worked. And because of the layers, it's phenomenal. And like I said, maybe the first or second strength of this film to me.
Yes.
Absolutely. Strong ones all around for that, sounds like. And that is going to come to me with style.
Very nice.
The style of this was absolutely great.
Good
Not only did we just mention like the blending of languages, which I think is partially style as well, like
Sure.
that whole
I'll
like
give you that.
managing of the way that went, but the cinematography was wonderful. The soundtrack was one of my favorite parts of this movie.
It was good, but not great, but solid enough.
No, I think
to
it
me.
was great.
I fucking loved it.
It was fine.
Yeah, I absolutely love the soundtrack. But it just looked really good too. There's this scene that I'll like remember forever of Billy and her father at the spa in their like pajama clothes, basically sitting against that like really stark red, almost looked like a bed
Backdrop.
what the hell is that called, headboard, and like talking to each other, and it's like this like at once like very silly but almost like regal scene. Like I fucking loved how that was just blocked and how it
Yes.
how it
The
looked
blocking.
on
Thank you for
screen.
mentioning that. Yes.
It's a really, really well done film, and there's just some like really awesome visual elements. There are amazing audio elements, especially soundtrack wise. Excuse me. And I can't say enough about the style of this film.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed it from the word go, from the very first shot, that you mentioned the blocking, and I've been saying this recently, but I think it is no exception here. The lighting was fantastic. The color palette, like sometimes it was muted, sometimes of course it was vibrant, like depending on what the tone of the scene called for. And costume and evening was solid. Like, and Sivo, did you notice this? Like you mentioned earlier, when they're all eating, it's always like, yes, a giant like array of food in front of them, and sometimes it's like moving around because of the way the restaurants are.
Those are like at their home tables. They
They have the turning tables, sure.
the lazy
like-
Susan, so they
right.
can like get whatever food.
But
they
the
just
funny
bring
thing
it
to me
around.
is like it's always like slowly, like constantly moving around.
Yeah.
People are just like offhandedly taking shit.
taking whatever as it
Yeah.
comes by.
It's so good. Like it just sells you so hard on believing like this family following along with their journey, following with their plan to enact this. And so again, some of the shots, even like there's a great shot of, I think it's of the hotel or maybe of the apartment buildings when Billy just gets back in the China and it starts pulling back, and like it's kind of like a mundane like thing, but the way it's again blocked and shot elevates it. So I think style to me is maybe the second most impressive part of the farewell, but it is certainly something to be seen.
They did a lot of cool stuff with the lighting as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to
I agree with that
mention
too.
that, and I forgot to earlier. But
I did on your behalf, but both blocking, lighting, and just in general, a damn good style.
So one of the most brilliant things they do, and I was listening to a podcast, I forget which one, I apologize for that, but they were discussing how you have foreground and background in comedies, and you can't have comedy going on in both of them because that you lose track of where the joke is. But they handled exposition here really well. They had exposition in the foreground and a comedic scene going on in the
absurdity
background.
happening in the background.
And it was
so good.
I don't think a joke to me fell flat in this. And
I laughed more than I thought I would at this movie.
Oh, yeah,
and
it was
like genuinely.
Also cried more than I thought I would in this movie.
Well, the thing is, they build up that again. They had the comedy for the emotional payoff later on because that draws you farther into the family. You have inside jokes within their family.
Yes, good call.
And you know the quirks of them very well. So I think this was brilliantly done as both a drama and a comedy. It handled its technical aspects very well for that.
It walked that line perfectly. Agreed.
Yeah, one.
Yeah, all right,
sir.
Cool. One's all around, and Ian, you can keep going with recommendation.
One of the best films I saw this year. Best films of the year. Maybe, to me, the best film of the year.
That's high stuff, man.
But Lighthouse might be a little bit better to me. But they're different films. This is definitely, if we were the Golden Globes and had comedies and dramas, this would probably be my number one for the comedy of the year. Perhaps rivaled by Jojo Rabbit, but I'm just saying that I love this film. It's up there. I think it's snubbing at the Oscars is awful. And yes, it's a 10 film. I knew that coming out of this that I was going to give it a 10.
Yeah.
So I'll just back you up. Like, I have to reevaluate. It's funny, as a quick story, we're doing our top films, like sort of gathering or getting our baskets or eggs in a basket for Oscars. Now I have to reevaluate having seen this film. Like, for real, like, as you said, it's one of the best films I've seen this year. I don't know if it's going to replace number 1, 2, or 3 even, but certainly it's got a spotlight on it. And yeah, it deserves to be seen and recognized and just acknowledged for the great film that it is. And yeah, everyone should see this film, and the Oscars should go fuck themselves for not including it in any way, shape, or form. That's my recommendation. Number 1 with a bullet.
I can get behind that. I think that this is a fantastic movie. It's going to be a 10 for all of us. Looks like it's this year's. If Beale Street Could Talk, I think we mentioned. I think somebody mentioned that earlier.
Ian said that you're stealing it from him, but it is true.
It absolutely is. That's the case. You know, like that movie got snubbed last year. I think it at least got a couple of nominations for other stuff, though. Like, it's not like it got completely snubbed. But it did get the snub for Best Picture.
I'm saying farewell to the Oscars.
Just as The Farewell got a snub here. They
Oscar
deserved it. The whole cast and crew deserves any
huge
anything
accolades.
they can get. Any accolades they can get. And honestly, it really sucks that they're not in that discussion this year. But
they absolutely should be.
Well, they're not in the discussion with being in the Oscars, but they are in the discussion for Best Movie of the Year.
Sure.
And I'm kind of just glad that a movie like this is out in the world. So I'm happy to have seen it. Yeah, see? BAFTA's what's up. But, I am going to wholeheartedly recommend this, and as always, I ask when we give a movie a perfect 10, do you think it deserved a perfect 10? I'm going to say yes.
Yes. In this case, yes.
And I think that's...
I've got to say anything else.
I think it's... I don't know. I highly recommend this to everybody, and I would be hard-pressed to find somebody who really could honestly say they didn't like this movie.
No.
I'm sure there are people out there. I don't want to meet them. Fuck you.
Screw you. Exactly.
And
I guess xenophobes wouldn't like this.
Yeah, I guess if you're against the Chinese,
Donald Trump probably hates this movie.
Who knows? Depends on the week.
Sure. Anyway,
but I think that's gonna do it for us. That's 10s all around. Giving us an aggregate score of, you guessed it, a 10.
F&A.
And I have been your host, Stephen Mosi, joined tonight by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Since we had camera issues, I wonder if we had a consistency of drinks issues.
Oh yeah, my drink went down. This is much
we'll
lower
fix it
than
in post.
It was before we stopped earlier. And Scott Thurlow.
And I'm going to go get fake married so my grandmother doesn't know that she's dying sometime soon. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
On that happy note, goodbye.
Good night.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?